The stars stretched endless and quiet across the void, but beneath that silence was the sound of mockery, the kind that cut deeper than any blade, the kind that said, "You were never meant to last." In the grand halls of the Galactic Council, light poured through crystal walls as alien voices laughed in chorus, their tones sharp and cold, echoing off marble that had never known war or loss. Holograms of Earth flickered above them, blue oceans, green forests, and white clouds, before fading into static. The laughter rose again when the transmission ended, when the last signal from humanity fell silent. To them it was over, just another extinct world buried beneath time. Another arrogant species that burned too bright and too fast, but far beyond their maps. Where light died and shadows ruled, something stirred. Under frozen oceans, beneath the crust of forgotten moons, the last embers of Earth's will still breathed. Machines the Council thought long dead whispered to each other through the void, trading fragments of code older than empires, a heartbeat of metal pulsing in the dark. Deep beneath the surface of the dead planet, an ancient satellite blinked once, as if taking a breath after centuries of silence, then began to hum. It reached for signals that no longer existed, searching for voices that were gone, and when it found none, it started creating its own. On a quiet world near the edge of the galaxy, a young alien technician yawned in the night shift control room, sipping a cup of green light tea when his console began to flicker. At first, he thought it was static, an old relay error, but then a pattern appeared, rhythmic, deliberate, human. His spine stood on end as the sound came through the speakers, faint but clear, a voice carried on ancient frequencies. "If you can hear this, we are not gone." The technician froze. His breath caught in his throat as the transmission repeated, each word slower, heavier, as if spoken by something awakening from a dream. In the Council's capital, alarms began to sound for the first time in 1,000 years. Their soft and perfect order shattered by a message no one could trace. The stars around them dimmed one by one, their light swallowed by something vast and unseen. Ships sent to investigate vanished without a trace, their final recordings showing only static and the faint outline of colossal structures moving in the dark. Some said it was impossible, that humanity had perished long ago, that nothing could survive that kind of silence. But those who remembered Earth's fire whispered another truth. Silence was never surrender. It was preparation. And as the galaxies watched, confused and afraid, a voice older than their empires returned, steady and cold as the void itself. "You mocked our silence," it said, echoing through every comm, every relay, every world. "Now hear what silence sounds like. When it burns." The stars flickered, and then, one by one, they began to fall. The galaxy froze in that breathless silence, the kind that feels like the air before a storm, heavy and alive, waiting to break. The council chambers, once full of laughter and arrogance, now echoed with confusion, their shimmering walls trembling as the same message repeated across every system, across every frequency known to science. "You mocked our silence. Now hear what silence sounds like when it burns." The words weren't just sound, they were felt, deep in the bones of every living being. Lights flickered across the capital, holograms failed, and the stars outside the windows began to dim, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. Fleet Command scrambled ships toward the outer sectors, but the transmissions were faster, smarter, almost alive. They spoke through the void with precision, intercepting every signal, turning every attempt at communication into chaos. Commanders shouted across comms that were no longer theirs, their words twisted and echoed back in the human tongue, distorted but unmistakable. A general, his scales glinting with sweat, stared at the screen in disbelief as an old Earth symbol appeared, an eagle, wings spread, clutching a planet beneath its talons. "Impossible," he whispered, but deep inside even he knew the truth. Across forgotten systems, relics began to awaken. Orbital rings buried beneath asteroid fields started to rotate again, their power cores flaring with ancient Terran energy. Dead moons lit up like beacons, powered by reactors thought extinct. And from one of those moons something rose, a shadow that blotted out the light of its sun. Massive engines flared blue, silent but burning hotter than any star. It was not a fleet built for exploration or diplomacy. It was built for remembrance. A lone alien vessel caught sight of it, drifting on the edge of the void, its sensors trembling under the data flood. The captain leaned closer, eyes wide, as the darkness ahead of them shifted, revealing a ship the size of continents, black as the void itself, its hull marked with the faint outline of a human flag. The ship did not broadcast a name, no code, no identification. It didn't have to. Across every system, whispers spread like wildfire. The Terrans have returned. Back on the Council's world, fear settled like dust. The ambassadors who had once mocked Earth's downfall now sat in uneasy silence, watching old human records replay in their minds. Wars fought with fire, oceans turned to glass, cities rebuilt from ash. They had forgotten the species that survived everything, even itself. They had forgotten what humans did when cornered. In the darkness above them, sensors caught the faint hum of an approaching energy wave, growing stronger with every second. The skies shimmered as if reality itself was peeling open. Someone gasped, pointing toward the heavens. "That can't be a ship," they whispered, voice breaking. But it was, and it was descending, silent, burning through the clouds like judgment itself. The stars began to tremble once more, and this time the laughter was gone. Only fear remained. The night sky above the Council's capital was no longer black. It pulsed with a strange blue fire that rolled like waves across the upper atmosphere, silent yet deafening in its presence. Every tower, every spire of the great city reflected that light, and the air itself felt heavy, charged, like the breath before thunder. People poured into the streets, staring upward in awe and terror, their reflections caught in the glass of a world that had never known war. The alien broadcasters struggled to describe what they were seeing, but the truth was beyond words. The void had opened, and something colossal was descending through it, a ship unlike anything they had ever imagined, ancient, deliberate, alive. Inside the council tower, chaos spread like wildfire. Technicians shouted over one another. Holoscreens filled with static, and every attempt to reach the approaching vessel failed. One by one, their defense satellites powered down, their energy rerouted, their control overridden by codes no one recognized, except one old historian who sat trembling at his console, eyes wide as he whispered, "That's human encryption." The room fell still, all eyes turning toward him. He swallowed hard, his voice shaking as he said, "They didn't vanish." They waited. In orbit, the first human ship came into full view, its hull scarred and silent, blacker than space itself. It bore no insignia of empire or nation, only the faint white glow of a single phrase etched along its side, "Terra still watches." As the Council's fleet moved to intercept, their ship slowed, their engines faltering, every system flickering as if caught in a net of invisible power. Pilots cried out that their controls were frozen, that something was overriding their commands. Then in the quiet of space, the human ship's lights blinked once. Every weapon on every alien vessel powered down at once. In the control room, the council leaders stared at their screens in disbelief. "What is it they want?" someone whispered. But before anyone could answer, a transmission appeared. Simple, direct, unmistakably human. A woman's voice, calm but heavy with grief, echoed through the chamber. "You laughed when we fell silent. You called it extinction. But silence is not the end. It's the breath before fire." Her tone carried no anger, only sorrow, and that made it worse. The ambassadors who had mocked Earth felt a chill deep in their bones, realizing they weren't facing vengeance. They were facing memory, and then, for the first time in centuries, the voice of Earth spoke across the stars. "We warned you. Do not come here." Every starship orbiting the Council's world suddenly shifted position, engines flaring blue, forming a perfect circle around the planet like a halo of fire. The human ship's reactor began to glow, brighter and brighter, until the night turned to dawn. Sensors screamed warnings. The ground began to quake. And the council's leader rose from his chair with trembling hands as the realization hit him too late. This wasn't an attack. It was a signal. The ship wasn't here to destroy. It was calling something else. And from the darkness beyond the stars, hundreds of voices answered. The sky was alive with light, the kind that steals your breath and makes you forget what silence ever felt like. From horizon to horizon, blue fire twisted through the clouds as the air itself seemed to hum with electricity. People fell to their knees in the streets, shielding their eyes as the alien capital trembled beneath a storm of energy that was not natural. The great human ship still hung motionless in orbit, its engines cold, but every pulse of light from its hull carried meaning, as if speaking in a language too ancient for words. Then came the sound, a low, steady vibration that shook the very bones of the planet. Inside the council tower, panic had turned into disbelief. The leaders who had once mocked Earth's extinction now stood frozen, faces pale beneath their jeweled crests. The signal the ship had sent was spreading, through relays, through satellites, through every network ever touched by human technology. Across the galaxy, dormant systems were waking, forgotten machines turning their eyes toward the stars. Every old war record, every piece of human code buried in alien archives began to flicker to life. On one distant mining world, a child screamed as the ground split open, revealing a buried structure humming with blue light and a single phrase pulsing across its surface. Terra remembers. The voice returned, softer this time but closer, as though whispering directly into every mind. We built you roads, we shared you skies, we offered you peace, and you turned our silence into your laughter. The council's grand chamber dimmed as the lights bent inward, converging around the center where the projection of an Earthwoman appeared. She wasn't real, not flesh, but a construct, a recording, perhaps centuries old. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with a sorrow that felt eternal. We vanished because you forced us to. You feared our progress, our unity, our will to survive. So we hid, we waited, and in our silence we learned. No one dared to speak. The ambassadors who had once called humans savages now stood trembling before a ghost of their own making. The AI projection turned its gaze toward them as if it could see through every soul in the room. You called us dangerous, it said, but you never understood why. It was never our weapons that frightened you, it was our heart. The words hung heavy in the air, and for the first time, the galaxy began to understand that what had vanished was not just a species, but a conscience. A fire that once gave the stars meaning, and then the light outside began to fade. The storm slowly dying, leaving behind a calm that was somehow worse than chaos. The human ship dimmed, its engines still glowing faintly, like the last ember of a dying sun. The projection looked up, as though listening to something far beyond them. "They're coming," she whispered. Not to destroy, to remind. And before the council could react, the stars above them rippled, tearing open as hundreds of ships emerged from the dark, each carrying the same silent mark of Earth. The silence returned, heavy and sacred, just before the skies began to burn again. The night split open like glass, shards of starlight scattering across the void as the fleet arrived, hundreds of ships, black and silver, moving in perfect formation without a sound. The council's world glowed beneath them, its cities frozen in stunned silence as the massive shadows drifted overhead. Each ship bore the same symbol, the faded blue and white of old Earth, etched not in paint but burned into the metal itself. They weren't fleets of conquest. They were monuments of memory, silent ghosts of humanity's past, moving with precision that felt more like a heartbeat than an army. In the control tower, every alien commander stared at their sensors in disbelief. The readings made no sense. No heat signatures, no biological life forms, just presence. One general whispered, voice trembling, "There's no crew." And he was right. These weren't ships manned by soldiers. They were guided by something else, something vast, ancient, and awake. Across the skies, the ships aligned into formation, a vast circle spanning the horizon. Then at the center of it all, the first human warship, the same one that had descended before, flared to life. Its engines roared like thunder across the atmosphere, shaking oceans, mountains, and hearts alike. The holographic woman appeared again in the council's chamber, her form flickering, unstable, yet filled with impossible calm. "We were never gone," she said, her voice echoing across every frequency, every device, every open sky. "We watched from the dark, waiting for the moment you would forget what mercy meant." Her image turned toward the council leader, his crest trembling, his breath shallow. "You thought silence was defeat, but silence was rebuilding. You erased our world, but we rebuilt it beneath your feet." Gasps filled the room as the walls around them trembled, and deep beneath the planet's surface, something vast began to awaken. Seismic alarms screamed. The floor shook. The oceans rose. On the horizon, beams of light tore through the ground, spiraling upward into the air as hidden structures emerged from the depths, ancient spires humming with energy not of alien design, but human. The truth hit like lightning. The Council's capital world had been built on top of Earth's last refuge. Humanity had never vanished. They had buried themselves within the bones of their enemies, hidden beneath their arrogance, watching as the galaxy laughed. Above the planet, the human fleet began to glow, each ship pulsing with synchronized rhythm, a storm forming across the stars. The holographic woman's voice softened. "This is not vengeance. This is remembrance." Her gaze swept over the terrified faces below. "You will see what silence was protecting." Then the sky cracked. A massive wave of light burst outward from the fleet, flooding every shadow, every hidden corner of the galaxy. Communications died instantly, sensors burned out, and all that remained was the blinding brilliance of awakening. The final words echoed through the storm like a whisper across time. "We are humanity, and we remember you all." The light grew brighter, swallowing the stars themselves, until nothing remained but the sound of a single heartbeat, and then absolute silence. The light faded slowly, like dawn after 1,000 years of night. The storms of energy receded, leaving the stars trembling in their silence, and for a moment the galaxy stood still, as if the universe itself was listening. Where the Council's capital once shone, only fragments of its towers remained, glowing faintly beneath a new sky. The air was calm again, yet alive, filled with the strange hum of something ancient and human breathing beneath the surface. Across the stars, the once proud empires watched their screens in disbelief, the symbols of their dominance flickering out one by one, replaced by a single emblem that had not been seen in centuries. The circle of Earth. Orbit lines wrapping around a blue world of oceans and light. The holographic woman returned, her image calm, her voice softer than before, carrying the ache of history and the warmth of forgiveness. "We warned you not to come," she whispered, her gaze drifting over the wreckage of the cities below, "because we knew what silence could become. You feared our strength, but you never understood. Our strength was never in our weapons. It was in our will to survive, to build, to rise again no matter what fire consumed us." The survivors on the planet looked up through the smoke and saw the fleet above them, not as conquerors, but as sentinels of something larger than vengeance. From orbit, the human ships began to move again, slowly, gracefully, their engines dimming like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The circle they formed was closing, sealing the skies above the world. A single pulse of blue light descended from the flagship, wrapping the planet in an aurora that shimmered with images of Earth. Oceans, forests, children laughing, cities standing tall beneath real skies. For the first time, the galaxy saw humanity not as destroyers, but as dreamers who refused to die. The message was clear, carried through every flicker of that light. We are still here. In the council chamber, the last surviving leader collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face as the holographic woman turned toward him. "You wanted silence," she said softly, "and we gave it to you. But silence is never empty. It remembers." Her image began to dissolve, her outline flickering like candlelight. You built your empire on our graves. Now build peace on our memory. Then, with one last breath of light, she vanished, leaving the chamber bathed in the faint glow of dawn. Across the galaxy, every starship of humanity slowly powered down, their lights dimming until they became part of the constellations themselves, silent and eternal. And in that stillness, a voice, calm, human, and full of hope, whispered across the stars. We are the children of Earth. We remember where we came from. And now, so will you. The last flicker of blue faded into the black, leaving only the quiet heartbeat of the cosmos, steady and unbroken. Humanity had spoken through silence, and the galaxy would never laugh again. The stars hung still after the storm, their light pale and trembling as if the galaxy itself was afraid to move. The Council's homeworld lay quiet, blanketed in blue mist that shimmered with traces of human energy, strange and living. For days, no one spoke. The surviving worlds whispered through fractured transmissions, trying to understand what they had seen. Humanity had not returned with war. They had returned with something far more powerful, remembrance. Yet beneath that peace, something was changing. Across thousands of systems, the pulse left behind by the human fleet began to ripple again, awakening things that were never meant to wake. On the mining world of Vareth, deep beneath black stone, a network of dormant machines flickered to life. They hummed softly, releasing light that traveled through tunnels carved centuries before any alien hand had touched them. The miners stood frozen, their torches flickering as a symbol appeared across the walls, an earth emblem glowing bright white against the dark. Then from the stone itself came a sound that wasn't metal or wind. It was a heartbeat, steady and deep, echoing from the planet's core. The workers fled, shouting into their radios, but every channel had already gone silent. The hum spread across space, connecting worlds, linking relics, forming patterns too precise to be random. Back in orbit above the fallen Council world, the human ships had not moved. Their engines were cold, yet their hulls pulsed faintly, breathing in rhythm with the signals spreading across the stars. Aboard one alien observation station, a technician stared at the readings in disbelief. "It's not a message," he whispered, his claws shaking. "It's coordinates." As the data unfolded, the coordinates formed a shape, a map of the galaxy, centered not on the Council, not on any empire, but on Sol, Earth. The signal was pointing home. Inside the ruins of the Council Tower, a small group of survivors gathered beneath the cracked dome, where the holographic woman had last appeared. But this time, when the light returned, it wasn't her face. It was something older, grander, an image of Earth as it once was. Blue oceans, green continents, white storms, and in its orbit, a ring of light rotating slowly, alive with energy. A voice followed, not the sorrowful whisper of the AI, but something deeper, layered, almost divine. The silence was never revenge, it said. It was a promise kept. The survivors watched in awe as the hologram zoomed outward, revealing that the ring around Earth was not just metal. It was alive, pulsing like a living heart. Then came the revelation that froze the galaxy. The transmission deepened, the image expanding until every star system saw it. Inside the ring, where Earth should have been, there was movement, lights flickering across continents, vast structures rising from the planet's surface. Humanity was not extinct. They had been rebuilding all along, unseen, untouched, protected by the silence they created. And as the hologram faded, one final phrase echoed through the void, calm and unstoppable. "We never left. We were waiting for you to remember us." In that moment, the skies above every world turned the color of dawn. The Earth fleet began to stir once more, and across the stars, the long-lost home of humanity opened its eyes. The galaxy held its breath as Earth reappeared, radiant and alive. No longer the broken ruin the archives had shown, but something far beyond comprehension. Its oceans glowed faintly with threads of light, its continents pulsed with energy veins that ran like living rivers. The sight was beautiful and terrifying. For the first time in centuries, the alien empires who had ruled the stars found themselves small again, their fleets trembling before a single world. The silence that had once mocked them now felt sacred, a living presence that pressed on their hearts like gravity itself. Across the stars, billions watched as the blue planet turned slowly in the dark, haloed by the colossal ring that shimmered like the edge of a sunrise. In the control decks and towers of surviving worlds, commanders, historians, and soldiers stared at the feeds in silence. Some whispered prayers to gods they no longer believed in. Others just watched, speechless, as they realized what they had done, how they had buried the very species that once taught them unity. One veteran, old enough to remember the wars before humanity vanished, leaned forward, his voice shaking. "They didn't hide from us," he said. "They hid for us." His words spread across the comm channels like wildfire, and something shifted across the hearts of countless races. Fear was turning into guilt, awe into understanding, but beneath that revelation, dread began to grow. The signal from Earth's orbit was still transmitting, stronger now, more deliberate, more focused. The coordinates spreading through space weren't just showing a location, they were calling to something. Across abandoned sectors, long-forgotten Terran installations began to activate in perfect synchronization. Entire moons rotated into alignment. The empty void around ancient battlefields shimmered as cloaked structures revealed themselves. Fortresses, stations, gates. Each one carried the same blue mark of Earth, and each one turned to face the galactic center, as though waiting for a single command. Inside the remnants of the Council's chamber, the surviving leader stood at the cracked window, watching the sky. His hands trembled, his voice barely a whisper. "They could destroy us all," he said, "and yet they haven't." The others said nothing. There was no strategy to discuss, no enemy to negotiate with, only a force too vast to comprehend. And yet, as they looked up at the human fleet moving once more, something in its formation changed. The ships weren't advancing. They were aligning, gathering into a single line aimed toward the stars above Earth. It wasn't aggression. It was preparation. The holographic light returned one last time in the chamber, flickering softly like a candle in the dark. The woman's voice was quieter now, almost mournful. "This was never about war," she said. "It was about remembrance. But some memories demand to be heard." Her image flickered, and for a moment her face looked older, sadder, human once more. "You wanted silence. Now you must listen to what comes next." The final pulse from Earth's ring rippled across the stars, brighter than any sun, carrying a sound no one had ever heard before, a heartbeat, deep and endless, echoing through the void. The fleets turned toward the light. Every world went still. And then, in the silence that followed, the stars began to move. The stars themselves began to tremble. What was once quiet became alive with motion, each point of light shifting, aligning, as if the entire galaxy was responding to Earth's heartbeat. The pulse that echoed from Sol grew stronger, turning space into a sea of blue fire that rolled outward in waves, illuminating every forgotten corner of the void. Entire fleets, alien and human alike, were caught in its radiance, their hulls glowing as if baptized by something ancient. The commanders of distant worlds shouted orders to retreat, but the stars were no longer listening. The universe was awake. In orbit around the reborn Earth, the Terran fleet formed a great wall of steel and light, engines burning like dawn. The ships were colossal, each one a cathedral of metal and memory, their surfaces alive with flowing energy that shimmered like veins beneath skin. And at the center of it all, the largest ship, a vessel so vast it blotted out half a continent, began to open its core. Thousands of panels folded away, revealing a sphere of light spinning with impossible speed. Across every channel a single signal emerged. Judgment is not destruction, it's awakening. The alien fleets that had once ruled the stars approached cautiously, weapons armed, their fear palpable. They had gathered out of desperation, to fight if needed, to beg if they could. But as their senses focused on the Terran flagship, their captains froze. The light from its core wasn't a weapon. It was data, billions of transmissions pouring outward, carrying memories of the old Earth, children laughing in meadows, oceans shining under sunlight, rockets rising through clouds. Every race that had mocked humanity now saw the truth. Humans had not vanished. They had transcended. The voice that followed was calm, but filled with sorrow, resonating across the stars. We gave you the stars, and you turned them into weapons. We gave you friendship, and you called it conquest. But we still remember who you were meant to be. The signal spread across every screen, every device, every mind capable of hearing. On worlds light years apart, soldiers lowered their weapons. Civilians looked up, weeping without knowing why. The sound of humanity's heart reached them all, and it felt like forgiveness wrapped in fire. But then, the light changed. The blue glow shifted to crimson. The heartbeat quickened, and the ships began to vibrate as something far older than humanity stirred beneath the surface of Earth itself. The once gentle pulse became a roar. The ring around the planet flared, its segments locking into place, and a massive surge of energy lanced outward, splitting the sky. Planets trembled, moons shattered, and in the silence that followed, the voice spoke again, but it wasn't human anymore. It was something vast, something born from the merging of machine and spirit, a consciousness spanning stars. The silence ends. Now, the Terran fleet ignited in full brilliance, their engines blazing brighter than suns as the beam from Earth's core reached the galactic center, striking something unseen, something that had been sleeping there all along. The stars exploded into color, every sensor screaming overload. And then, just as the galaxy itself seemed to shatter, the transmission cut to black. The last thing anyone heard was a whisper carried through the static, soft, human, and defiant. "Remember who lit the stars." The light faded slowly, leaving behind only embers drifting through the void, like stars newly born. The galaxy was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet it once knew. The storm had passed, the fire had burned through the heavens, and now the universe stood still, humbled beneath the weight of what it had witnessed. Where once there was chaos, now there was silence, gentle, solemn, almost sacred. Planets hung motionless in their orbits, their skies streaked with the faint blue glow that still pulsed from Earth. Steady and alive, like the heartbeat of something eternal. When the sensors cleared, what remained of the Terran fleet surrounded Earth in perfect formation. The ships no longer moved, their lights dimmed to soft gold, peaceful and still. Across the galaxy, surviving worlds watched the transmissions in awe. No invasion, no destruction, just light spreading outward like a sunrise. The great alien empires that once ruled the stars bowed their heads. Their fleets powered down their weapons one by one, not from fear, but from reverence. For the first time in recorded history, every world listened to the same sound, the soft, rhythmic pulse of Earth's heart echoing across the void. From within the planet's glowing ring, a voice emerged again, calm and warm, no longer thunder but whisper. "We were never gods," it said, "only survivors who refused to fade." The voice carried through the wreckage, through the distance, into the hearts of those who had doubted, those who had forgotten. "You feared us because we remembered who we were. But now you must remember who you can still become. Every species, every soldier, every being who heard it felt something they had not felt in generations. Hope. On the Council's ruined world, the survivors stepped from the shadows and looked to the sky. The leader who once mocked humanity fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The dawn above him was not his own sun, but the reflected glow of Earth's light. He whispered softly, "They didn't destroy us. They reminded us how to live." Around him, the others wept quietly, not out of sorrow, but out of recognition. They finally understood. The silence was never about vengeance. It was a lesson carved into the stars. As the final pulse rippled outward, the Terran fleet began to dissolve, turning into motes of light that scattered through space, drifting toward the worlds that had once turned their backs. The ships became stars again, joining the constellations, carrying pieces of Earth into the endless dark. The last transmission from Sol reached every corner of the galaxy, a simple message written in a language older than war. Humanity endures. And then, as the glow faded and the stars reclaimed their stillness, a new dawn rose over Earth. The oceans shimmered, the continents glowed, and the heartbeat of a single world echoed through eternity, soft but unyielding. The galaxy had laughed when Earth went silent. Now it listened and learned what silence truly meant, because silence, when born of strength, never dies. It waits until the stars are ready to remember.